Good evening to all. The topic for today is the management of neck in head and neck cancers. We have a long way to go because it's a very extensive topic. And just to throw things in perspective, I shall be starting with a little of basics and then escalate the level of the topic. Yeah. Why this topic is very important is for the fact that neck nodal metastasis is a very important prognostic factor in head and neck cancers. A single lymph node metastasis decreases the survival by 50%. An additional lymph node metastasis or an extracapsular extension would decrease the survival by a further 50%. Additionally, the presence or absence of lymph nodes actually determines how we are going to treat or manage the patient. And we know that in the TNM8, extracapsular extension has been categorized as a separate category of either N2A or N3B, depending upon the single or multiple nodes with extracapsular spread. So all in all, the management of cervical lymph nodes is essential or a very integral part of the management of head and neck cancers. I shall in this talk focus only on oral cavity cancers, and that was squamous cell carcinomas. I know the topic is very broad. We have some subsites like laryngeal cancers, pharyngeal cancers, and metastasis of unknown origin. Time permitting, we can discuss this in subsequent webinars. Very briefly, to go into the history, neck dissections was first described by George Washington Cryle way back in 1905. It was from the Cleveland Clinic and the seminal articles published then. But it was not until 1951, Hayes Martin from the MSKCC actually stepwise described the procedure of radical neck dissection in his classical article. This is George Washington Cryle, and this is the right is the cartoon of the radical neck dissection in which all levels of neck nodes are dissected, levels 1 to 5, along with the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the internal jugular vein, and the spinal accessory nerve. It is very important for us to understand the nomenclature of neck dissections. The radical, as we had just saw, there's something called as extended radical, which I'll come to in a bit. There is also something called as the modified radical neck dissections, the selective neck dissections, which we do more often right now. The radical neck dissections, as was described, was actually practiced for every case of neck dissection previously. But right now in our clinical practice, the use of radical neck dissection is very limited. In our practice, or possibly any practice across today, the practice of radical neck dissection would be possibly less than 5%. It's limited to patients who have advanced neck disease, especially in the recurrent setting, that is in the salvage setting, following chemotherapy and radiation with a gross extranodal extension. And that will be the case with an extended radical neck dissection, wherein additional lymphatic or non-lymphatic structures will be taken. So it's a rarity to perform a radical and extended radical neck dissection in today's practice. Further, there are issues of radical neck dissection, the shoulder syndrome, and most of these patients would receive either radiation and chemotherapy and radiation, and this would have a detrimental effect on the function of the shoulder. The terminology of modified radical neck dissection was introduced by Watt and Robin, but subsequently popularized by Boca, and at the same time, Argentinian Soares termed the term functional neck dissection. All in all, they had evidence to suggest that the oncological outcomes of a modified radical neck dissection was similar to that of a radical neck dissection. And a modified radical neck dissection is right now a standard modality for an N+ neck at this point of time. Of course, the spinal accessory nerve is the most important structure that one needs to preserve, and it is at risk, especially when you're dissecting level 2B and level 5 of the neck. The other terminology of selective neck dissections, and we have various terminologies that we used prior, the supraomohyoid, the extended supraomohyoid, the lateral and posterior lateral neck dissections. But in today's practice, it is best to categorize these neck dissections as standard neck dissection or selective neck dissections, and in parentheses or in brackets, mention the levels that you are clear. For example, if you're doing a supraomohyoid neck dissection, you would say selective neck dissections levels 1, 3. Again, it's very important for us to understand the classification of neck nodes. This was first done in 1991. In fact, the first classification was in 1930s by the MSKCC group. The standardization came up in 1991. The American Association of Otolaryngology and Headache Surgery classified the first 5 levels, and subsequently the 6th level was added by the K.T. Robbins group. So this is something which is pretty standard, and every clinician practicing neck node dissection should be aware of the anatomy and boundaries of the various levels, right from levels 1 to 7. I'm not going to the details of this. So what's important from the oncologist perspective is to know what is the propensity of lymph node metastasis. And as you go anteriorly to posteriorly, the incidence of neck nodal metastasis increase. So the incidence will be maximum in hypopharyngeal cancers, and subsequently in oropharynx, and the oral cavity subsequently will come. So this is the increasing rate. As you go anterior to posterior, the rate of lymph node metastasis or propensity would increase. And for oral cavity cancers, as we are going to discuss in more detail in this course of the talk, you have the levels that are classically described as levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in oral tongue cancers and sometimes in floor of neck cancer, floor of the mouth cancers, you have a propensity for skip metastasis for levels 4 as well. So sometimes the N0 neck management you could possibly involve clearing these levels as well, and the evidence for which I will come and discuss in some time. Now, when it comes to evaluation of these patients, it's a very important thing. I've described 5 modalities of evaluation. One is the clinical examination, which is very important from the trainee perspective, and the use of imaging like CT scans, MRI, ultrasound, PET CT scans, and neck dissections. From the clinical examination perspective, we know that there are a lot of fallacies. 30 to 60% would be the sensitivity and specificity, and that doesn't mean that one should sort of not do a proper neck examination. Many a times you could pick up some nodes, and an astute clinician could be able to pick up good levels of nodes. But having said that, the sensitivities and specificities range in the range of only around 30 to 60%. CT scans and MRIs are commonly used. CT scans more often, and MRIs also in certain midline structures like the tongue and the floor of the mouth, and also in the skull base. It has a sensitivity ranging from 65 to 88%. And what was known is as a very popular MCQ when I was training was, what is the best modality to stage the neck? And the answer was ultrasound neck at that particular point of time. And there was a data from Debon's meta-analysis saying that ultrasound neck and the guided FNAC could give a pooled sensitivity in the range of 80 to 98%. But one must remember that if you read this meta-analysis very closely, they had included N plus necks as well. So this meta-analysis was not only for the N0 neck, it included a lot of patients of the N plus neck as well. And that is the reason why the sensitivity and specificity of ultrasound and guided FNAC was very high. Subsequently, many series which looked exclusively into the role of ultrasound in N0 neck, that is a node negative neck, and this was our study which we published earlier that is late last year in December 2019, shows that the sensitivity specificity of the ultrasound was only in the range of around 40 to 50%. And this was also found by many authors across the series as well. Having said that, the role of PET CT in an N0 neck, this was a practice that was actually condemned earlier. This was said that is not recommended because the sensitivities was in the range of only around 60 to 70%. But then we had a popular study called the Akron 6685 trial published in JCO last year that said that PET CTs could have a role in the management of these cancers. But in the present day practice, it is preferable not to say that PET CT has a role in the management of a N0 neck. So having seen all the modalities right from clinical examination, ultrasound, CT, MRI, and PET CT, we know that none of these imaging modalities can actually detect cervical node micrometastasis. And this is essentially the problem in case when we manage a clinically node negative neck that is called as the N0 neck. And that is the reason why histological examination of the neck has become a gold standard and continues to remain a gold standard in the management of early oral cancers. Now, how do you decide, how do you address the neck? And it's very, very simple. The management or the philosophy of the management of the neck parallels the philosophy of the management of the primary. For example, if it's an early stage cancer, you treat it with a single modality, either surgery or radiation therapy, surgery being preferable, the neck is also addressed by the same modality. If you're addressing the neck for as a radiation therapy for certain cancers like the lip or the commissure, the neck is also addressed by radiation therapy, and vice versa. Similarly, if you're addressing the primary by surgery, you address the neck by surgery as well. You have to understand certain other nomenclatures that we commonly use. One is called as a therapeutic neck dissection, and this is where clinically or radiologically you have clinic positive neck nodes in the neck. Something called as a prophylactic neck dissection, that is clinically and radiologically where you have no evidence of disease in the neck, and salvage neck dissection, that is more and more used in the cases of laryngeal and pharyngeal cancers, wherein organ conservation strategies are becoming more and more popular. You tend to address the neck in a setting of post chemotherapy and radiation. So these are pretty standard terminologies. So if you see across the board of understanding about neck nodes, it is very important to know these standard terminologies and use them appropriately in your clinical practice. Now there is something called as a therapeutic neck dissection. That is, if you have a clinically node positive neck, the standard recommendation is to do a modified radical neck dissection, and this is something that you must sort of keep in mind. Having said that, there is an evolving role of doing what is called as a lesser surgery in the form of a selective neck dissection, even in the presence of a neck node positivity. And you have evidences from right from 2002 in Anderson's paper right to up to Skip's paper in 2005, that the regional control of a therapeutic neck dissection in an N1 or an early N2 neck was equivalent to that of a modified radical neck section. So for all practical purposes, please keep in mind that the standard teaching would be to do a modified radical neck dissection, but you can selectively do in a certain select group of patients, although you don't have really randomized controlled trials to back it. In clinical practice, you can do what is called as a selective neck dissection in a N+ setting as well, and you have certain evidences to back it. But what is very important is when you should not do a selective neck dissection in N+ neck. Obviously, when you have a massive adenopathy in N3 disease or any extracapsular extension or soft indications like prior neck surgery or RP, you would not do a selective neck dissection in an N+ neck. You would do a modified radical neck dissection or a radical neck dissection as in certain limited cases. And obviously, in such cases, you would add adjuvant treatments for these patients. Coming to the more interesting or more controversial area initially, but now it's all clear, or clearing rather, is the prophylactic neck dissection. That is wherein you have no nodes clinically or radiologically. So one may ask, why do you actually need to address a neck in a patient who has clinically as well as radiologically no evidence of disease in the neck? The reason is pretty simple. You have occult lymph node metastasis in the range of around 20 to 40%, which is not picked up by some of the imaging modalities that we discussed of ultrasound, CT, MRI, or PET-CT scans. Interestingly, you have extranodal extension in up to 10%. In the CENT trial of sentinel lymph node, it was around 17%. So mind you, even in a clinical and radiologically N0 neck, you could have about a third of the patients having occult nodal metastasis and maybe a tenth of the patients having extranodal extension also that may not be clinically apparent. And that is the reason or the rationale for doing a neck dissection in a N0 neck that is clinically and radiologically negative. One must remember this Wies phenomenon or Wies paper that said that elective neck dissection should be considered when the probability of occult metastasis is greater than 20%, and I would allude to this in the coming slide. The traditional teaching before 2015 was there was always an equipoise or a debate whether to address the neck or not in certain scenarios, and we were guided by the principle based on depth of invasion or tumor thickness. We would definitely address the neck whether it was a T3 or a T4 primary when you do what is called as a cheek flap to address the primary, or in certain adverse risk factors of the patient or tumor, or certain adverse sites wherein, as I said, base of tongue, you had a high propensity of lymph node metastasis. So there was a controversy prior to 2015 whether to address the neck or not. And only in certain high-risk scenarios we would do an elective neck dissections. In many of the other patients, we would do what is called as a watchful waiting. We had the N0 randomized controlled trial from the TMH group in 2015, and it very clearly showed that one recurrence could be prevented by every 4 elective neck dissections. One death could be prevented by every 8 elective neck dissections. And in fact, you had 4 randomized controlled trials to address this. 2 of them are from India. One was by Dr. Faki's group, again by the TMH in 1990s, and Dr. De Cruz in 2015, and 2 other earlier trials by Kligerman and Yuan. So 4 randomized trials to address this issue. And we find that in the meta-analysis, which I'll come to a little later, we find that the elective neck dissection procedure that we do for clinically and radiologically negative neck is just not merely a staging procedure, but it is a procedure that actually gives a survival advantage to the patients by somehow trying to address the issue of micrometastasis. This is interestingly seen in the TMH trial of 2015, where there was a comparative or a comparable overall survival in the true negative arm of the elective neck dissection group when compared with the true negatives of the observation group. That means to say that elective neck dissection is not just a staging procedure, but by addressing the micrometastasis, you can have a therapeutic effect or a survival advantage to these patients. Following the publication of the N0 neck, you had evidences from multiple meta-analyses as well. There was one meta-analysis by Funsula's group earlier in 2011, which did not include the randomized controlled trial, and it had a slightly different conclusion. But the 3 meta-analyses that were published are in 2018, and 2 of the meta-analyses were published pretty recently, in fact last month itself. One was the Massey's meta-analysis that was in 2018. What these groups had done, they had segregated the T1 and the T2 groups, and they found the incidence of occult metastasis in T1 was 11%, T2 was 24%. So what Massey's group recommended was elective neck dissection only for the T2s and a wait and watch policy for the T1 oral squamous cell carcinomas. Subsequently, of course, you had the O's meta-analysis that was published pretty recently in Oral Oncology, in fact earlier this month, which looked into 8 studies, and it's conclusively said that elective neck dissection could lower the rate of recurrences, better overall survival, and also a better cause-specific, disease-specific survival as well. And very recently, you have got the Abraham's meta-analysis that was exclusively for early oral cancers. 24 articles, all the 4 randomized controlled trials I had mentioned, plus about 20 odd retrospective studies, around 2,000 odd patients of elective neck dissections and 1,600 of watchful waiting. And this meta-analysis by Abraham said that you definitely had fewer recurrences when you did a neck dissection versus observation. In fact, they had extracted data from 10 studies which looked at not just the overall survival, but the 5-year overall survival, and they said that the elective neck dissection was associated with a 67% improvement in the 5-year overall survival. Seems pretty high, but at a forceful recommendation to consider a neck dissection in an early stage node negative oral cancer. Much of the evidences had come from cancers of the buccal mucosa and the tongue, which constitutes close to 50% of the cancers of the oral cavity. We don't really know whether the cancers of the upper alveolus and the hard palate, which are also subsites of oral cavity, actually benefit from a neck dissection. There was a meta-analysis by Tangs et al., which was published in the IJOMS in 2016. 10 retrospective studies, and it also said that elective neck dissection was justified in T3 and T4 cancers. 80% overall survival in the END group, 67% in the wait and watch group. Subsequently, pretty recently, and of course in 2019, December, you had a NCD database analysis by Obayani et al., who said that even in early cancers, you could have a benefit of doing an elective neck dissection. But however said, this data did not have a lot of other factors like the histological adverse factors, issues of adjuvant radiation, patterns of recurrences, salvage, etc. So by and large, for advanced T3, T4 oral cavity cancers which involve the upper alveolus and the hard palate, you could or you should do an elective neck dissection. you could possibly avoid an elective neck dissection in a T1, T2 upper alveolus or a palmate lesion. So we now know that we have to do surgery in majority of these patients. What is the extent of neck dissection? And this is called as a high quality neck dissection. And in a high quality neck dissection, you will have to harvest at least around 18 lymph nodes. The extent of neck dissection could involve levels 1, 2, and level 3. In fact, the ASCO recommendation says that you could very well stop with level 3 also. But in some cases in case of tongue cancers, you have skip node metastasis to level 4. So you may consider clearing the level 4. In fact, when you do a therapeutic neck dissection, they recommend that you address the levels 1, 2, 4. Definitely, you should not address levels 5 because the incidence of metastasis is less than 1%. So in an N0 neck, it is enough that you addresses the levels 1, 2, and 3. And very rarely, in case you have some evidence of disease in level 2A, you could address levels 4 as well. Now, there's this controversy whether to address the level 2B or not. And this is primarily because of the reason I mentioned, that the spinal axillary nerve courses along the levels of levels 2A and 2B, and addressing the level 2B would put the spinal axillary nerve into jeopardy. So whether to address the 2B or not, there was a controversy, and there was a lot of articles said that you need not address. The issue that was there in multiple publications is the levels of 2B involvement was predicted by the level of the 2A involvement. That is, if you had a level 2A that is involved, then there are chances that you could have an involvement of level 2B. And there was no isolated level 2B involvement in the absence of level 2A involvement. So statistically, the numbers may actually favor skipping a level 2B in the absence of level 2A involvement. But in real time, you are not going to know whether there is a micrometastasis or isolated tumor cell in the level 2A. So one has to use clinical judgment and try to sort of take level 2B when there is a clinical judgment of a suspect node in level 2A, because of the reason that salvage neck. So once these patients recur, then the salvage rates are very poor, and it causes a high morbidity and mortality in these patients. So that comes to the concept of sentinel node biopsy. It is, of course, very popular in breast cancers, melanomas, penile cancers, and it is picking up in very many subsites and head neck cancers. Also, it's actually come now into the NCCN recommendations, and various other recommendation societies recommend sentinel node biopsies for head neck cancers as well. The need for sentinel node biopsy came because of the fact that about 60 to 75% of the patients actually in the N0 do not harbor lymph node metastasis. So you're actually over treating these patients to get a survival advantage for the entire cohort. And we know that elective neck dissection, unless properly performed, can have some amount of morbidities as well. So why not do a selective sentinel lymph node biopsy in these patients? And the concept is something that most of us are quite familiar with. In case of head and neck cancers or oral cancers, to be more specific, we do it by the dual method, the blue dye method, as well as the scintigraphy method. The addition of a SPECT could increase the sensitivities and specificity. And a lot of studies, including our study, said if you do a sentinel node biopsy in oral cavity cancers, the identification rate is in the range of 96 to 100%. So as I said, it's an emerging tool. It's there in many of the recommendations. You have multiple meta-analysis to vouch for sentinel node in head neck cancers, and this is the most recent meta-analysis that was published last month by Kim et al. 98 observational studies, and they say high sensitivity and specificity support the role of sentinel node biopsies in clinically T1, T2 oral squamous cell carcinomas. We also had our own experience of sentinel node. The sentinel node identification in our cohort was around 98%. The sensitivities and specificities was very high in the range of 88% to around 100%. And what we did in our series was we did an intraoperative single section, frozen section of the sentinel lymph node. And what it found that the sensitivity was equally good, ranging from around sensitivity of 70% to a specificity of close to 100%. And this was our publication, which was in the Journal of Nuclear Medicine, which was there published in October to December issue of 2019. But however, there are a lot of issues with the sentinel node. It's not that easy. It's not something that you can practice on a routine basis. The issue is because the neck is very small, you have complex high density lymphatics. The neck lymphatics are very close to the tumor, so you have what is called as a shine through effect. There is a propensity of skip metastasis, but that in turn would be an advantage itself. You can pick skip metastasis or contralateral metastasis. In fact, in our series, we had 2 patients who had contralateral neck node metastasis that could have actually been missed if you had not done a sentinel node biopsy for these patients. And that's why you need a reliable method of identification of intraoperative detection of these lymph nodes. I had written an editorial in one of the dental journals about 3 years back, stating the current status and future perspectives of sentinel lymph node, and all the future perspectives were also discussed. The perspectives in the form of use of novel radio tracers like the tilmanocept technetium, use of ICG, which is coming up, the indocyanine in green, which is coming up in a very big way, not just in these cancers, but various other cancers across the body. Also improved imaging in the form of a freehand SPECT and molecular assays and sense, that is the sentinel node navigation surgery. So all these things are discussed in the editorial, so interested people can go and read it and get to know about these concepts. And very recently in the ASCO publication that was ASCO presentation that was there earlier this month, we found a randomized controlled trial in operable T1, T2 oral cavity cancers showing that sentinel node biopsies was equivalent to neck dissection. So you will have more and more evidences as you glean through the text that a lot of randomized controlled trials are in the pipeline to show that sentinel node biopsies may be comparable to neck dissection in operable oral cancers. That comes to the other part of the discussion, that is a salvage neck dissection, that is in the scenario of post chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And this is, as I said, applicable to more of laryngeal and pharyngeal cancers, because the majority of the times the modality for treatment is oral cancers is upfront surgery. Very rarely you use radiation therapy or chemoradiation therapy as a primary modality of treatment in oral cavity cancers. Primarily, you would treat a non-surgical or an organ conservation approach in a laryngeal or a pharyngeal cancers. And in some of these cancers, you would have lymph nodes which could actually respond well to chemotherapy and radiation. But 15 to 25% of these patients would actually fail in the neck. And how to address it, when to address it is the issue. The initial concept was to do what is called as a planned neck dissection. That is, irrespective of the response of chemotherapy and radiation, do a neck dissection for all these patients, especially if they are N2 or N3 disease to start off with, saying that there are a lot of series that say you have a better local control if you did this approach. But however, you had the disadvantages. That is, only in 20 to 40% you had positive nodes. That means to say in 60 to 80%, you're unnecessarily treating the neck for these patients. And we know that if you operate in a post-chemotherapy and radiation setting, surgery becomes slightly difficult. There are a lot of complications and some late toxicities as well. So there was an emerging role of PET-CT scans. And this is a level 1 evidence in which we use PET-CT scans in the management of head and neck cancers. So 12 weeks following the completion of chemotherapy and radiation for a response evaluation, you do the PET-CT scan, and this was dictated by this wonderful PET neck trial that was actually published in the NEJM in 2016. To add on to the PET-CT findings, you could judiciously use ultrasound or a guided FNAC to manage your patient of PET-CT response. Now, if you see a PET-CT responses, they could be in the form of 3 types. Not everything in life comes in a black and white. There is complete response responders are the white ones, the incomplete are the black ones. And equivocal responses. Quite often in clinical practice, you get what is called as equivocal responses. And we as clinicians wondered what we used to do. The PET neck protocol actually said for if you had a complete response, you need not address the neck. And that is very, very clear. In case of incomplete responses, you go ahead and do a neck dissection. But what do you do when you have an equivocal response? And this is something that has been described, and it's not a very clear-cut definition of what is called as equivocal response. And you have said a trial which was published earlier this month that is saying that in a HPV-positive cohort of patients, you could actually avoid a neck dissection or still do a waitful, watchful waiting in some of these patients of equivocal responses without any detriment to survival. So, as I said, complete responses, observe incomplete responses. You have to operate in equivocal response, use your clinical judgment. In a certain select group of favorable cohort of patients, you may well observe them beyond 12 weeks as well without any detriment in survival for these patients. Now there is another concept called the super selective neck dissection, and this means that you remove a compartment of lymph nodes which are two or fewer. In a classical neck dissection or a modified radical neck dissection, you would remove all the 5 nodes. In a selective, you would actually remove at least about 3 or 4 levels. But in a super selective, as the name indicates, you remove 2 or lesser. It has been tried in 2 settings. One is the setting of an elective surgery. So the initial surgery, you could sort of try to do what is called as a super selective neck dissection, or you could use it in a salvage setting that I was previously discussed, in a setting of post-chemotherapy and radiation. A concept that was popularized by Katie Robbins was proposed rather by Katie Robbins in 2005, popularized by Soares in 2013, but there is not much of evidence to actually propagate super selective neck dissection, and I've mentioned this because for completion. And what is more important is also to have a liaison, good liaison with your pathologist, because the grossing protocol is very, very important. And it has been shown in an earlier publication this year that if the pathologist gross the fibrofatty tissue in the neck, then your neck yield would be good. As I said, a high quality neck dissection would be a neck dissection in which you should get at least 18 lymph nodes. You may have done a good job, but if your pathologist is not good and not diligent in grossing, the lymph node yield will be less. So to have a good lymph node yield, it also depends on your pathologist. So in case you have any doubt, you go back and check with your pathologist, ask them to gross the fibrofatty tissue also as well. Some of them may have lymph nodes, and you can address those. So I think I'd conclude my talk saying that neck node metastasis is a very important, or in fact the most important prognostic factor. It influences the treatment. Critical anatomical knowledge is important, and properly done high quality neck dissection actually saves lives. Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm open to take any questions and comments. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Arvind. It's quite a short task. Expecting this topic to be quite a detailed one, and going to, I think you need to deal it in different.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it was very extensive, so I thought I would cover one part of it, but in itself, and for the 40 minutes or so, we covered quite extensively. But yeah, I think there are some other subsites like pharynx cancers I've not covered, but by and large, the philosophy is same. I think they should be able to sort of get the gist of the whole thing by this talk itself.
So we'll open it for discussion. Shivasharana Biradar, what is your question?
Sir, good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Sir, you told about the 2B controversy, no, sir? In prophylactic neck node dissection. Sir, how to arrive at decision over removal of 2B nodes, sir? Should we do intraoperative frozen section of 2A or then proceed, or what, sir?
That's the $1 million question. If you see the ASCO recommendation, and I would suggest that you strongly go by the recommendations, it is that you clear at least levels 1, 2, and 3, and levels 2 include level 2B as well. So if you want as a perfect guideline or so, the recommendations say that you clear levels 2B as well. I told about the controversy just to tell you that the propensity of involvement of level 2B depends on the level 2A. So doing a level 2A frozen section may not be a standard practice. Some people may choose to do it, but as I said, like the standard practice or guideline would recommend doing level 2B as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, Ishwar, sir.
Good evening, sir. Sir, Arvind sir, excellent talk. Is there a terminology like extended suprahuman neck dissection? Is it to be still continued? Is there any controversy in using this terminology, and where is the limit of this one procedure?
Sure, sir. Yeah, extended supraomohyoid neck dissections would in effect mean clearing levels 1, 2, 3, and level 4. In fact, for oral tongue cancers specifically, and also for floor of the mouth cancers, they said that there is a propensity for skip metastasis based on Bob Byers' paper to around 10 to 16%. And that was the logic to do an extended supraomohyoid neck dissection. But nowadays, the terminology more or less is to use the terminology of selective neck dissection and cover the lymph node stations that you are removing, because these terminologies are very, very confusing and keep changing. So if you are to refer to extended supraomoid neck dissection, it would be preferable to use the terminology selective neck dissections levels 1 to 4.
1 to 4. There is little gray area, particularly when you spoke about the tongue cancer. If there is a doubt, it has crossed slightly the midline. We have MRI wise or image wise. Can we do this extended on the opposite side, restricting the radical neck dissection on the one side? Is it true for tongue cancer?
That's a very important question, sir. I should have covered it, but it's very important that the tongue and floor of mouth cancers have a propensity for contralateral lymph node metastasis. I briefly alluded to that. And if it's a locally advanced cancers, like which is crossing the midline, there is a reason for us to do an elective neck dissection the other side as well. And in that side, you may not go to levels 4 as well. Even if you see the current ASCO recommendation is that you need not address level 4 in tongue cancers as well. If you are doing a good levels of dissections, level 1 to 3, the recommendation is that it should be good enough.
Good enough. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Arvind, you can look up the chat box.
Yes, sir. I think.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions from Dr. Arvind. A good talk as usual. The first one is regarding the sentinel lymph node biopsy. Where do you inject the dye in case of oral cancers? Is it intralesional or peritumoral or somewhere else?
In fact, if you read our publication, we have described exactly how we do it. We take an insulin syringe and go all across. Like you take just about 1 ml of it and inject on all 4 corners of it. And that's how we do it. And then, of course, we do it by a combined method. So one is the lymphoscintigraphy method, where the radiocolloid is injected in the nuclear medicine facility. Subsequently, after a couple of hours, the patient is shifted to our OR, and we have a hand-held gamma probe. Intraoperatively, prior to starting the surgery, we inject with the insulin syringe, take the tumor, and then we do the neck dissection for these patients. So it's a pretty standard technique, and we inject it with the insulin syringe, and the details, as I said, are given in our publication as well.
So my another question is, where do you put PET-CT in the evaluation of patient for unknown primary with secondary in the neck?
No.
That's a very good question. It's a very important question as well. In fact, the very few indications of PET-CT with a level 1 evidence, that is the highest level of evidence, is in the unknown evaluation of the unknown primary. So you first need to confirm that it's an unknown primary, and subsequently PET-CT. And PET-CT could change the management in up to 30 to 40% of the cases of an unknown primary. It can confirm whether it's a true unknown primary or not. And the 2 other indications, as I mentioned, was in a salvage neck setting, you do the PET-CT. Also, in some cases of equivocal cases of T3 or T4 cancers, you could use a PET-CT. So these are at least the 3 major indications wherein you have the highest levels of recommendations to use PET-CT. MUO, the metastasis of unknown origin, is one among them.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think I'll take the questions in the chat. Dr. Saurabh is asking, do you have any experience of ICG for sentinel node biopsy? I have not used. In fact, you use the traditional method of using the blue dye, and that is the dual technique. ICG, I've used it in a few cases for breast cancers, but we have not used it as a standard of care. But it is a very, very promising technology. Lots of publications and lots of evidence is coming for the use of ICG. And mark my words, I think it will come up in a big way in not just in open surgery, but also in cases of minimally invasive and robotic surgeries as well. Dr. Ilan Kumaran asks, is there evidence to leave to be? I think I've just answered it, Dr. Ilan. Dr. Yashasmi asks, minimum number of lymph nodes that needs to be harvested in the sentinel technique. First, let me tell you all that the sentinel technique is given as one of the methods in which you evaluate these patients. But not many centers actually follow very rigorously the sentinel node biopsy technique, and this is for various reasons. It is for the reasons of primarily the traditional approach is to do it in 2 settings. That is, you identify it, and if the lymph node is positive, you tend to go back. Then The other issue is you have to do what is called a serial sectioning. Sometimes you have to do immunohistochemistry for that node. So it adds to a lot of costs, and also it's a double stage procedure. But having said that, there is a good recommendation to do a sentinel lymph node. Majority of the centers would actually do an elective neck dissection. That is actually a good standard of care. The sentinel node biopsy is comparable, although there are no head-to-head randomized controlled trials, and it is unlikely that we may have one in the near future, given the sort of numbers, like the numbers that you need to arrive at having a survival advantage is very huge, maybe 1200 or more numbers, which is highly unlikely. So having put that in context, in cases of the minimum number of nodes, generally they harvest anywhere in the range of 1 to 3 lymph nodes. That is what they tend to do in cases of sentinel node biopsy. And how do you put the neck incision? You exactly put it in the same way. You put it where the hot mark is. So you have an intraoperative gamma probe to guide your decision. But in the study, what we did is we didn't do it as a like an exclusive sentinel node. We just do it. We just did our study as a validation study. So we picked up the sentinel node and subsequently went on to clear the neck nodes in these patients. So ours was a more of a validation study. The reason why we did the study is there was a proposal to conduct a randomized controlled trial, and we wanted to equip our center to see how good you are at the sentinel node. So we found that our results were pretty encouraging. So of course, our standard of practice is to do elective neck dissection in all the cases, but I feel that with more evidences evolving for sentinel lymph nodes that is coming up in a big way, we might change our practices in some of these patients. Over says management of large fungating node involving level 2, 3, 4. What should Patol surgeries come? Patient was operated for squamous cell carcinoma 2 years back. P2 NX with no adjuvant treatment given. PS165. So I think Dr. Ofiza has given a scenario of having a large fungating nodal mass and how to manage. So as I see, I think this is a regional recurrence. What is very important is that we'll have to stage this patient, do a proper metastatic workup for these patients. And I would recommend to do a PET-CT scan as a part of the metastatic workup, since it is a recurrence, a large, massive regional node recurrence. And if it's an isolated recurrence, then you may contemplate surgery for some of these patients, or based on the extent of the disease in the PET-CT scan, you would decide whether you give any sort of treatment. But these are, if it's an isolated, then surgery. But I must tell you that without the incorporation of surgery, this patient would not have a very high likelihood of cure. Dr. It's a great talk. Whole of frozen section and N0. Now, some centers use frozen section. We don't tend to use frozen section. The reason is that we tend to do elective neck dissection in all our patients. And as I said, even by chance you have one node which is very positive in case of your elective neck dissection, it doesn't really matter, because you would anyway treat these patients with an adjuvant treatment. So for N0 neck, we would do an elective neck dissection in almost all our patients. And in an N+ neck, again, we would address these. So the issue of frozen section doesn't come much. But of course, having said that, frozen section I had used when I was training the TMH days, but we don't tend to use it any longer, given the evidence to do an elective neck dissection in almost all scenarios of patients with early stage neck cancer, oral cancers. Should we need to FNA proven residual node for Dr. Prem Kishore asks? Yes, as I said, you will have to do a PET-CT scan, ideally at the end of 12 weeks, and then take a call on these patients. If it's an obvious node, that is a clinical node which is more than a centimeter, and if it's also having a PET-CT uptake, then you know that for sure it's harboring disease, and especially so if it is in the region of the node that was pre-existing, you have no doubt you will absolutely go ahead. The problem comes, as I said, in equivocal cases in which the node is a centimeter, the PET uptake or the SUV uptake is less. You may judiciously try to use an FNAC in those patients to guide your management in such equivocal cases. But by and large, barring the black and white scenarios that I said, you would sort of not generally use an FNAC in your clinical evaluation of your patients. Dr. Bharat asks, in your series of Sentinel, do you do a single stage or two-stage surgery? Do you rely on frozen section? How accurate is? Oh, a lot of questions. I feel, Bharat, you should read our paper. And as I said, we didn't do it as a randomized control trial. We were preparing ourselves for a randomized control trial. We wanted to test our centers, validating our protocol. So we did a sentinel node biopsy initially, and subsequently we did a neck dissection, elective neck dissection. That was a standard of care for all our patients, because this was a study done over 2 years. And we have published our study. We feel that we are pretty comfortable to go in as a randomized control trial. And we used frozen section for these nodes. And we found that the frozen section sensitivity was pretty high. So what I foresee is, of course, it is just like sticking my neck out. Subsequently, I think the lot of data or lot of science is going into the intraoperative identification of the sentinel node. As I said, the whole concept of sentinel node came because around 70% of the cancers you were overtreating. The problem was we did not know which were the 70%. Just for benefiting the 30% of patients, we had to operate all 100% of the patients. So this sentinel node, maybe if the technology is so robust that you could reliably identify the node and image that node also, then possibly you could consider it as a gold standard. But having said that, even in our series, in up to a couple of patients, I think in two odd patients, a frozen section missed and the final histopathology actually picked up those nodes. So it's not a foolproof method, but having said that, sensitivity is around 70% and specificity is very high, close to 100%. So please read our paper and you would sort of get all the other details what I said. A lot of questions you've asked. Ultrasound, ultra-staging IHC, nidectomy. Yeah, nidectomy in effect is like a super selective neck dissection. But I feel that this is a concept which I'm not too comfortable with. It is described in the textbooks. Some centers do it, but I feel that in case you have residual disease, it is preferable to do the standard teaching would be to do a sort of a comprehensive neck dissection. But having said that, you'll have to really select your patients very well for doing what is called the nidectomy or the super selective neck dissection. I mentioned this just for completion because otherwise people will ask me, sir, you didn't cover this topic. So I just wanted to bring it to your notice so that this is something which is there in the textbooks and how your clinical practice is going to be guided by that. Equivocal response to PET CT, post CTRT, do you repeat a PET CT? Oh, this is a very, very tricky issue essentially. I think the equivocals are something that we don't really have an answer to. There is not much of evidence. Having said that, we go by the clinical situation of that particular day. What we tend to do is we tend to follow up these patients on a regular basis and try to clinically evaluate them and at times try to do a sonography because you would sort of be interested in only a particular region. So you may tend to do a PET CT, but not a PET CT very soon. Definitely, yes, at 18 weeks is something that you may consider. That is, I hope you're not meaning 1 week later, because or 6 weeks later. You may do a CT scan or you may do a PET CT scan after a couple of months as well. So I think it is very important that there is no standard answers to your question. We would evaluate the patient clinically and do an appropriate imaging. As I said, PET CT can be done, and the timing is something which is subject to sort of anybody's clinical judgment, I must say. Saurabh asks, Dr. Bob Byers' paper was never replicated in another series. Yeah, absolutely right, Saurabh. I think a lot of series have never replicated the Bob Byers paper, and that is why if you see the TMH trial, the standard elective neck dissection was to do levels 1 to 3 and not level 4. Even the ASCO recommendations, if you see, for neck dissection is to cover levels 1 to 3. But I know a lot of examiners are very touchy about the extended supraomohyoid neck dissection concept. So if your examiners force you say that yes, it's extended supraomohyoid neck dissection, but the evidence actually says that if you clear level 1 to 3, both by the evidence of the randomized control trial and the recommendations, you're good. salvage sitting, what is the neck or extent of neck dissection? As I said, Dr. Jay, I think we would do a comprehensive neck dissection in these patients because this is the setting in which you can achieve a potential cure for these patients. Of course, it would depend on the primary. For example, in the salvage neck setting, you expect the primary to be in the larynx or the pharynx. So accordingly, based on that, you would clear the levels. You may not clear level 1 in that region. You may clear levels 2 to 4. Whether you address levels 5 or not is something that you can use your clinical judgment. But yes, I think it is very important. I don't normally have not practiced nidusectomy or super selective neck dissection. But as I said, it's just a concept which I have mentioned for this patient. Why redo surgery rate is more in R&D? I didn't understand the question properly. My redo surgery rate is more in R&D. No, I think I think Dr. Anjali, I'm not able to really understand the question. Right? From what I understand, you mean to say if you're doing a radical neck dissection, then the chances of recurrences are less. Having said that, in the other perspective, if you have a neck node that comes in a salvage setting, that post chemotherapy and radiation, then more often than not, it would have, you expect that it is fibrosed, it may have some sort of extranodal extension. So in a scenario of post chemotherapy radiation with a node having a perinodal extension, there may be a case for doing a radical neck dissection. And these are the only scenarios in which we do a radical neck dissection in today's practice. Dr. James asks, sir, can we progress without incisional biopsy, as many times tumor increases in size following incisional biopsy because it is a clinically diagnosed, if other investigations. Yeah, incisional biopsies by and large for neck nodes, no. I think it is, you tend to, the general advice is to address the primary and base your management based on the primary, because more often than not, even in an N0 neck, you tend to clear the neck. In an N plus also you tend to do. So the usage of FNAC is very, very less. And also incisional biopsies are something like that. You may tend to use it sometimes for a primary tumor, especially if there is a submucosal component or a non-proliferative component or a deeply infiltrative lesion, but not for the, preferably not for a neck node. Sarabas, do you recommend sentinel node biopsies and pure lower gingival cancers? The difficulty, yes, I think it is extremely difficult. A majority of our work, in fact, all the work in our series was in oral tongue cancers. It is inherently very, very difficult to do it in case of gingival cancers. But having said that, I said that if we are of the philosophy of doing elective neck dissection in all our patients. So it all depends on the philosophy. So we don't really face this issue of gingival cancers, but that's a very interesting thing that sentinel node biopsies in such cases will be exceedingly difficult. Dr. Manias, is there any difference in doing neck dissection in MAS from levels 1 to 5, a single specimen, or remove the nodal stations? Is it advisable? Yeah, this oblong versus like not removing it individual, there is not much evidence. In fact, there is a very recent paper that said whether you consider oblong primary versus neck, and actually didn't show any great significant difference in the outcome. As long as you're able to do a good neck dissection, clear all the levels of neck nodes and take at least 18 nodes and do a high quality neck dissections, you are good. And what is very, very important is, even after your completion of your surgery, you gross the nodes and send them individually as packets to your pathologist so that you know exactly which positivity and at which level is there. And it will actually, it's a good clinical practice to do that. Dr. Saurabh Jain again would ask, would you recommend NACT in 3B node in which or borderline resectability, partial encasement? Yes, I think it's a talk. It's a question beyond the scope of this talk, but yes, there may be a consideration for neoadjuvant chemotherapy in some cases. As I said, the question of operability will differ from surgeon to surgeon, and sometimes they say that carotid more than 270 degrees, and that's the radiological criteria to call it unresectability. So if you are able to clear that node very clearly, then even in N3B you can do upfront surgery. But having said that, you will have to sort of balance the judgment based on your primary as well. It all depends on how much is your primary and what is the level of your neck node. So you are, in effect, I think you base your decision on both the primary and the neck rather than exclusively the neck alone. And I would say that if it is any primary, say the larynx or the pharyngeal primary, then even in an N3B disease, I think upfront chemotherapy and radiation can be given for these patients. In case of oral cavity cancers, there is a little bit of controversy. You may want to consider neoadjuvant chemotherapy. But having said that, whatever treatment you give, if you are able to incorporate surgery, only then you can think of any semblance of cure. These patients have a very poorer prognosis in the long run. Yeah, I think the same question has been asked again. Dr. Priya also said, good. Dr. Lavanya asks about the in-transit metastasis, and I answered, I think the Bob Byers was something that I had answered it. It's called the skip metastasis. After sentinel node, do we do MRD or elective neck dissection? Yes, I think it all depends. Of course, if you are doing the practice of selective, that is sentinel node biopsy, if it's a positive thing, as I said, there are two options. The standard teaching would be to do a modified radical neck dissection. And as I said, in certain specific scenarios, you could do a selective neck dissection, avoiding, of course, depending on the primary oral cavity, you could avoid level 5. You may go and take levels 1 to 4 in these cases of doing a therapeutic neck dissection, that is called, in case of sentinel node biopsy positive patients. Dr. Bharat asks, do you have any cutoff of SUV for PET-CT for equivocal response? Yeah, no, that's again, this equivocal response are the ones that are hair splitting, and I must say that you really need to use a lot of clinical judgment. What I must say is that we must study the scans upfront. We must study these scans later, do a very, very close look at these patients, and then take a call as to how to go about it. I think that is the bottom line thing. We really cannot split hairs over small equivocal. Having said that, there are a lot of circumstances in our clinical practice where we do sort of observe a lot of these equivocal response patients, and that would be decided on a case-by-case basis. Questions Dr. Saurabh is asking, any particular reason why staged bilateral radical neck dissection lowers papillary edema rates? Do contralateral pathways develop in the waiting times? I think that's yeah, I mean, this was the classical teaching, Dr. Saurabh, that while doing a bilateral radical neck dissection, we tend to stage it. But I know that for some, that there have been some centers that actually do bilateral radical neck dissections also in a single stage setting. There are no one answer to this, but given a scenario, I think we would tend to stage these patients, and that's how we go. But having said that, in the presence of a bilateral neck nodal disease, the prognosis is going to be slightly poorer. So you'll have to very intelligently manage this patient, throw your book at the patient, give chemotherapy, radiation, everything, and to these patients, and try to sort of in an effort to cure these patients. Okay, I think I answered all the questions, Dr. Sir. It was quite a long question and answer session. I think they made up for my thing,
every time
the presentation. Yeah.
It's quite an informative lecture, and thanks again for spending late hours, Arvind. We'll see you again in the next session. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Thank you.